I guess I'll do an update for you. Being I showed that car this morning. I had it finished by 11:30, or it was about maybe 3 hours, which would have been the time to do that. That needed to be done, but there's still something else. A lot of times when you work on vehicles, you do that. There's those who do this, but there were basically 2 or 3 spark plug wires that were completely burned through, and those were on the 2 spark plugs that were loose when I checked yesterday. So it was running on, it's a 6-cylinder, so in essence it was running on 4 cylinders. The 3 spark plugs in the back, I wasn't sure if I'd get to that last one because these are deep chambers, and I was at risk of getting the socket in there. They're like 8 inches deep in extension, and it was hard in the back. And if for whatever reason I couldn't get that socket out, as well as the spark plug, that would have been, I'd have to take everything else off. But I said, the last second I risked it, and I got it out. But either way, after I was done with it, you recheck all your vacuum lines, because it started and ran great. You could tell it's running on 6 cylinders now. But then it started bogging down, and it's probably something simple. I rechecked all the vacuum lines, and I noticed it didn't happen as I was doing this, but this might be another problem. As I lifted up parts to get to it, there's a burnt through vacuum line. Now, the ones that were all on there, I got back on there, but sometimes one vacuum line can cause all that trouble. And of course, the majority of the work is done. To trace that vacuum line would have been easy, but I'm done. I can go so much, and I'm gonna let Oscar finish it. That way, he can trace the exact line. But it worked as much as it had to work. It worked. Nothing, it needed to be done, and that would have been a lot to have a mechanic do all that. I'll just do the update because, in a way, felt like I was stuck at the house because I had to do that. I could have took my motorcycle out, and I thought I had dropped my wife's car off because I had her car earlier to get the parts. And of course, they know like I get negative, and so we'll just talk, reality of life. But I said, I got it fixed. But I said this. I'm still going to have Oscar finally finish whatever minor thing it is. But I said, I'm just tired now. Because this is an old car with 250,000 miles, and I've done a lot of work on cars. And it just reminded me of when I first came to Texas. I bought a lot of vehicles, fixed them. And I'm 56 now. And I took some, chances when I retired, when I did. I said, but over time, it's been 10 years now. I said, certainly something will happen that circumstances would change. And I just said, I could see I'm going to wind up dying, like we all die, and everything will be the same. Still fixing your car at the age of 65, maybe. 65 is a long way to go. And I just thought, and I was thinking of the scripture I taught recently on the test of Abraham. I believe, I think I posted, I know I posted it this last week. But I mentioned Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher from the 1800s, the father of Christian existentialism. The reason I brought him up is because the book he wrote about the encounter of the test of Abraham, I believe the title was Fear and Trembling. And Kierkegaard was a critic of the Danish church, if you will. And so he's also accepted in the, study of philosophy too. So he's a unique figure. But what his spin on it was not really the biblical spin, but he kind of looked at that and said, God had told Abraham to kill his son. And he looked at it from the vantage point of, though that was a test, but it was also a command that violated the moral law itself. That was the spin that Kierkegaard put. Though the law, the commandments come later in the book of Exodus, but yet he was saying, and so existentialism actually, as a philosophy, it's the philosophy of existence, but it deals with life and our existence. Makes sense, right? And so the way my mind is, when people don't feel well, the way I manage is I'm out. I would never be able to live like in the house. I know people, I visit friends, and some of them have roommates, people I know, but they're watching the TV and, enjoying it, sitting around during the day. A lot of those guys are drinking. I would never be able to just sit like that. But then today, part of the test was not only I'm still fixing my car, and it worked well. I mean, the job went better than it would have. It would took that same amount of time if you took to a mechanic, but then the next thing has to be done, and I'm done with the next thing. But then I thought, not only is that, but then I'm stuck at the house. And today it was raining and cold. It stopped raining. And of course I could walk. I did that. And I could just leave and say, I got to get out. But I just felt the sense of, like, the whole thing of seeing. Recently, I still pray. I read the paper every night and pray for the serious criminal cases out of Corpus Christi and Nueces County. And this guy got busted for this, and this guy got busted for this. And then I think, and many of them after maybe 10 years in prison or whatever, oftentimes then they're back out struggling with addiction, drugs, whatever, back until they die. And I understand. I teach the Christian doctrine of original sin, and I believe in it. But then I sometimes look at humanity. One of the criticisms that people give is the creation and everything in it. It says in Romans, the whole creation groans and travails together until now. And so everything, if you will, is under a curse. Now we as the people of God are not under that curse because Christ became a curse for us. But I'm looking at all of our bodies. They're corruptible things, They're decaying. Brains. And I look at, sometimes I just see it from the perspective of Solomon when he wrote Ecclesiastes. And we continue to do the things that we're called to do. But then I thought today, I said, there should have been some change in the sense of, at this stage, where it reminded me of when I was first working on my cars, first coming to Texas, and did a lot of those things myself because I had to. This time I pretty much had to as well. And I just thought, it isn't, not that it's unfair, but I thought, it makes me tired. It makes me tired to say, because I'll have it fixed and it'll be running. And then I'll have to do it again. And I'll do it again. And I thought surely by now, situations would have changed where I would have done what most people do. I never believed in buying brand new vehicles because that's a waste of money. I did it once with my truck. And also we did it with a van once. 2 times. But I buy things, used. Because I just think buying a new vehicle. I wouldn't have never bought a new one, but I probably would have went out and got something. Because it gets untenable at 250,000 miles. And I fixed a lot on that car. And I thought, well, I'll do it for now. It's temporary. And the sense I have is, oh no, you'll have that until it breaks, then you'll be on foot. That's the sense I have. I'm just feeling it that way. Like, that's fine. We'll do what we have to do. But I get tired. Part of my survival is being able to not be stuck here, to be out. And so it played on me like, and that's the other test, that though you're uncomfortable when you don't feel well, being home by yourself, you feel uncomfortable with that. And it was like, well, here's that test now after the other one. And it just drains me. It drains me. That's how I view it. You say, John, maybe your perspective is skewed somewhat. But that's an aspect of life. That's a part of it. And whatever answers we give, even to other people, saying, this is the answer, this is the answer. We also understand, and look, I understand. But then we say, the shooting, whatever it is in Parkland, the things that the family took that kid in because his mother died, and that kid had problems for a long time, and then it resulted in 17 people being shot. I think 15 students died, and then 2 that were staff or something. And then that'll be the next. You say, well, we as society might be able to do something, possibly. But then you say, okay, that kid had mental problems. All right. And that kid was adopted, and he was rejected when he was... And was he rejected when he was young for any fault of his own? Or I believe his mother was possibly an addict. I think that was part of the story where he then got adopted, which really is no fault of his own in that part of his life. Obviously, he made a sinful decision, paid for it for the rest of his life justly. And then the families will be tested because they lost their 15 kids. And the one father will visit his daughter at King David Cemetery. And that will continue. The whole creation groans and travails together until now. These 2 paintings. This is Danny, who called himself the atheist. He's one of the friends I met in North Bergen. But I knew Danny was not an atheist. He was a Catholic, but he was a disgruntled Catholic. And that day he took a Catholic book out of his trunk, and he even would show me sometimes, I carry a Bible, John. But he kind of we became good friends. Danny passed away about 2 years ago. And some of my street friends in North Bergen, they kind of know Danny, because he sells like knickknacks and all, and sometimes they were legitimate stuff like, maybe they borrowed $10 from Danny. But he had like a reputation. Danny's a cheapskate, and some of the older guys, I called them the senior crew, they would go back and forth. But I became good friends with Danny, and I used to hang out with him and some of the other guys at White Castle. Then Danny went to Burger King and started hanging out there all day, and I would go visit Danny. And we became good friends. And though Danny was considered like he would sit in the Burger King, he'd bring his own maybe food or whatever, and then drink the coffee, of course, so he'd order it, but then, get as many refills and sit there throughout the day. But Danny showed me, he had these paintings in his trunk. Danny was an artist, but these were not done by him. He showed me one day, and he said, John, the man that painted those was a 90-year-old man there in New Jersey, and he met him at some art show or something. But Danny said the man was an amateur painter, but those have texture to them. And Danny knew he taught art and was also an artist himself. And he said, but these are some of the best works that he had seen because of the things he understood. And he bought those, maybe for $100 and something or whatever, but he had them in his trunk. And I looked at them, and I didn't ask for them. But I said, I like those, Danny. And a few times he wanted to give me things. Like sometimes people, like, even small things. John, I said, no, I don't want you to give me anything like that. But that day he said, why don't you take these? I said, I'm going to take them, Danny, because they were made by an old man who probably passed away. But this is a man on a journey. This is like a seagull. And you get the water, and it's a picture of life. And so I was thinking of a lot of that. And so I'll do this as the update. Everything on my side of it did go well. There was a vehicle that pulled up. I'm very rarely sitting in my house working on the car with the garage door open. Today I was. Some vehicle pulled up with dark tinted windows, illegally dark, too dark, front and back, and parked right in my driveway. Not pulled in, but right in front, and my door was wide open. Working on the car, and they just sat there. And I got started looking like, getting mad. Then they left, and a few minutes later, a vehicle pulled up right there, another one. That vehicle looks like some civilians have them, but they look like the undercover cop cars with the lights on the side. But this was a newer one, again tinted, right in my driveway with my door open. I was starting to get mad. And so I looked at them, and then they backed up and stayed on the street. I'm not sure what they were up to or what was going on, but I just found it strange. They parked right in front of my garage door open, and most people are not home during the day. And okay, so that'll be the update. I had to occupy some time. I figured I'd speak. I wanted to go to the water spot, and like I said, if it wasn't raining, I could have took the motorcycle out. So hopefully that'll just be the little update, all right? God bless everybody.